So guys, what if Naruto was Phantom Secrets be released? Movie. Sam, come on. Please? Can you just do it for me? Danny Fenton begged pathetically to one of his best friends, otherwise Lancer will give me a detention. Again. For the 97th time this year alone. And it's only been 4 months since we've started school. The gothic girl rolled her violet eyes at him, and you just didn't do your homework assigned yesterday, why? The boy rolled his own blue eyes argumentatively back at her, a frown tugging on the edges of his lips. The box ghost kept popping up, just as I was about to start it, and then Skulker wanted to test his brand spanking new invention he got from his employer on me, so I finally gave up on it. Ouch, Sam commented, wincing at the story and backing down from the argument. Do I even want to know what the invention did? Not really, Danny said with a shake of his head to emphasize the brutality of whatever it did. The goth sighed softly and began to rummage through her black and purple backpack. Okay, fine, I concede, you get a copy of the homework for free, but this is just a one-time excuse. Thank you, Sam. You are the best. Danny immediately grabbed the offered paper and began scribbling the answers on his blank copy. Geez, you have some real big bags underneath your eyes, Sam observed sympathetically. Did you have nightmares again? Danny sighed then nodded, knowing lying to her was not a good idea. The teenager handed her paper back while stuffing his own in his backpack. The boy's dark friend didn't get, or ignored, the hint, but instead asked, what was the topic this time? My orientation. Danny hesitantly met her violet orbs as she frowned in distaste. Sam was the only one the teen had ever confided in about him being homosexual. He could never tell Tucker, his other best friend, about it. Danny pretty much knew the African-American boy was rather mule-headed that way. Besides, Sam kind of had forced it out. Flashback: a boy and a girl, both with light skin and dark hair, about 6 or 7 years old, were sitting on a kid's bed, engaged in their game, Survive. Hypothetically, a player was told a situation and had to try to figure a way out as the opponent threw obstacles at you. First one to be stumped, loses. What if you were lost in a forest? Chibi Sam shot quickly at Chibi Danny. I would wait until someone found me, retorted Danny, just as quick. What if a bear attacked you before someone found you? I would grab a branch and fight it off. What if the branch broke before it could cause any damage? Then I'll stab the bear with that point. What if a snake slithered up off the branch and bit you in the arm, injecting deadly poison within you? I'll cut the bite and suck out the poison. What if it spread to the rest of your arm? Then I'll cut off my arm. Then Sam, without any warning, reached over and tried to give him a peck on the lips. Danny jumped up fast, almost upsetting Sam right off the bed, and yelled, "What was that?" Sam sat up and tried to smooth out her black hair while giving him a reproachful glare. My mother, she never said mommy at this stage. Said if you liked a boy, then kiss him. Danny blushed as the double meaning of the word, I am not really interested in girls. Oh, the not yet goth girl thought it for a moment, then said, what if it didn't stop bleeding? End of flashback. Sam ignored the spaz her friend was under in favor of asking the boy, who was half human, half ghost, did you read the newspaper this morning? Danny paused long enough to give her a long blank stare. Alright, that was a rather bad question, I'll admit it, but there's now a new principal at Casper High. The other geezer finally retired, grinned Sam. Danny shrugged, and we should care. Why? Rolling her eyes yet again, Sam rapped his head with her fist. Hall-oo. Did your brain stay in bed after you got up? Casper High is our school, remember? Maybe if I can get there before Mr. Lancer, I can convince her not to dissect frogs this year. Danny tried to get her attention by poking her. Sam? Frogs have rights too. Oh, sorry Danny, what is it? She smiled sweetly at him, as if she wasn't randomly yelling just before. Rolling his baby blue eyes, Danny merely pointed out the tall red brick building that they Sam was recently talking about. Around the front, the students milled around in little cliques. Actually, it was more realistic to say that the football jocks and preppy cheerleaders were going in rounds to other kids, haplessly bullying science nerds, bookworms, and band geeks. In ways that include intellectually critiquing them, stuffing them into metallic trash cans, and making everyone all around miserable. Danny fought the urge to roll his eyes yet again, as Dash, his bully of the high school years, lumbered towards him in a threatening manner. Sighing, the boy resigned himself to another pounding that he couldn't defend himself without exposing his secret identity when suddenly someone intervened. Everybody freeze. A voice screeched out from the front of the school. There, on top of the concrete steps to the school, right between two thrown open double doors, stood a woman, not just any woman, but a really short, brown hair, rosy-cheeked, Mom of the Year cover page, type of woman. Gah. Of anyone on earth, it has to be her. Danny groaned, slightly ducking down as if that would cause the woman to overlook him. Sam raised her dark eyebrows as she watched the petite woman's eyes snap with inner fire as she silently snarled at the kids. You know her? When we moved to Cockling for a year, in 8th grade, Danny nodded, still hunched over. To put it shortly, we met her as already as a psycho, insane, crazy woman, and who knows now. The tiny woman marched up and seized a jock, who had just finished stuffing a boy into a trash can, by the ear. All of you come with me. She proceeded to drag the boy off, ignoring his cries of pain and protests. Everyone else followed meekly behind. Whispers drifted to Danny and Sam. Who is she? Is she the new principal? Where are we going? She silenced all of the students with a scary glare of doom registered and marched them into the auditorium to ceremoniously dump the boy she was pulling by the ear in one of the chairs. Standing on the stage, she waited, tapping her red high-heeled shoes, for the students to sit down. The boy moaned to himself. He was sure his ear had grown an extra inch. Without any further ado, she began. I am your new principal. You can all address me as Principal Smith, if we ever come face to face, but our real introduction is supposed to take place during 3rd period, so I'll skip all that for now in order to get to the topic we have come in here for. Today, this morning, on the first day of my new job, I saw something I have absolutely no tolerance for, and it will not ever happen in my school again. Threats. Ambushing. In other words, bullying. It will not happen ever again. Or else the consequences will be dire. Her voice was not calm, but to the point of shrieking with the passion she felt against the subject. One of Dash's football buddies, tall, African-American, boulder for muscles type, snorted disdainfully, not buying any of the not-so-subtle threats in the speech. Principal Smith rounded on the student, her dark eyes flashing dangerously. Do you really think I am joking? Do you want to try me? I'll just say this once. If I catch anyone bullying, and I don't care whether it is verbal, physical, or any other sort, I will kick you off the school teams and clubs and whatever else you could be partaking in. Furthermore, a conference with parents will be scheduled and suspension will follow if any more bullying occurs. She completed the short speech with another scary glare of doom registered, then her personality went 180 as she smiled and said, "Have a nice day." What did she say? A pretty Latino girl, Paulina, asked. She snapped her makeup kit close with a decisive click to complete the image of a popular girl ignoring the rules. Sam snorted, not at all impressed, but added sweetly as if she actually cared. She said, "If you insult anyone, you're off the cheerleading squad, girl." Paulina glared at the goth, her pretty eyes narrowing dangerously. Was I talking to you? No? Sam. Danny said quietly, laying a hand on her shoulder before his friend did something extremely stupid. Sam backed down but still glared at Paulina. Right, Fentina. Dash mocked as he came up behind the three. Hide behind your girlfriend. Just cause you have no muscle means that you ain't got pride either? Bet your dad's ashamed to call you his son. Danny paled at his words. He was already afraid his dad would be ashamed that he was part ghost because the man was already ashamed his son was gay. Feeling the tightening tension of Danny's hand on her shoulder, Sam glared at the bully, but before she could protest his cruel words, a voice cut in. Now really, Mr. Baxter. Such a flagrant disregard of the new rule. You are hereby suspended from the football team until further notice. Principal Smith reinforced the rule with a scary glare of doom registered, but her expression changed, as quickly as a mood swing of a pregnant woman, when she turned to smile at the half-ghost. Hello, Mr. Fenton. How have the wounds healed since I saw you last? Danny shivered at the smile he was given. He had seen it before. It was her plotting smile. Something really, really bad will happen between now and next week, probably concocted to help out his life. A weak smile was all that Danny could produce. All of the wounds have healed fine. Mrs. Principal Smith. How are your son and husband doing? Mrs. Smith's grin grew a few more molars, making her look even more evil. Oh, they're currently residing in a big comfy room with nice strong men to keep the two from hurting themselves. All the kids present including Danny blinked at the new, and now proved insane, principal. Oh. Mr. Lancer seems to be calling me, Chow. You know what? Sam remarked offhandedly, as she watched the small woman skip away merrily. I think our new principal is insane. I am off the football team. Dash was still in shock, not that he looked any different with confused eyes and slack jaw, in fact, that is how he usually looks. Paulina bit her lip and thought out loud, how did she know Dash's and Fenton's names? Danny shook his head out of the daze the woman always put him in when the two met and answered, I have no idea about Dash, but I am pretty sure she knows me. You got me kicked off the football team. Dash finally broke out of his little trance into a rage. Whoa, Dash. Calm down. The smaller boy backed away from the ticked-off bully with his hand cocked back, ready to punch. She'll probably let you back on the team if you do community work or something. And if you stop doing that. The gothic girl broke in, slapping the threatening fist, rolling her eyes. Jesu, Mr. Lancer's class is in 2 minutes. All of the teens' hearts skipped a beat and the students started to run as fast as they could towards the class. Racing down the halls, they completed the race with the door within seconds away. Unfortunately, Danny was forced to skid for a sudden stop as he spotted Mrs. Smith in front of the door, talking to a bald man in the room. The other teenagers kind of ran into him, tripping and falling. They managed to get completely tangled up in a tackle with Danny stuck underneath the three and Sam rather dazedly perched on top. She eyed the giggling principal and glaring teacher, making no move to get up. Well, she did say she heard Mr. Lancer. The half-ghost gasped from under the pile. Gee, thanks Sam. That really helps us out now. He tried to push Dash's huge and muscular chest off him, and at the same time, remove Paulina's rather pointy stilettos from his thigh. All the while, his hands were still twisted behind his back. Needless to say, it didn't work. Danny barely forced back a frustrated snarl that would not entirely fit his nice guy character. Dash and Paulina were trying to fight their way out, but it only increased entanglement with the two losers when they accidentally pulled Sam into the fray. A cough from a man with an enlarging waistline and thinning hair halted their struggles. As he got their attention, Mr. Lancer asked, "Do I want to know what happened here?" Principal Smith beamed at the teacher, ignoring the pile of students. "Why, Mr. Lancer. These students seem to really enjoy your class." Mr. Lancer frowned in reply. "These students have shown no signs of enjoyment in any classes. They seem to be on the borderline of failing." As soon as that statement came out, Mrs. Smith's grin widened and her eyes sparkled with madness. "Well, let's see if an extra credit project will help them out of that spot." The new principal almost skipped down the hall, humming a strange tune. With a new scowl dawning his face, he faced the students and, "Oh. And don't give the kids a tardy, K. It was all my fault," called Principal Smith from down the hall. Shaking his head at the retreating woman, Mr. Lancer turned to the kids with his strong bark. "Well, get inside. We do need to begin class." Sam and Danny slunk into the classroom, beelining towards the seats Tucker had saved for them near the back. The other two trounced into the room, heading for their friends, chattering non-stop as if they did nothing wrong. "Where were you guys?" Tucker whispered as soon as they sat down. "I was waiting for as long as I could, but then I had to get in here." Sam answered for both of them. The new principal cornered half of the school and gave a lecture. "On the bright side, there's a new rule against bullies. On the downside, she is insane." "Samantha, is there something you like to share with the class?" asked Mr. Lancer as he turned away from the board where he was beginning his lesson. Ignoring the students' idiotic giggles, she innocently smiled at their teacher. "Of course not, Mr. Lancer. I was just admiring our new principal." The old man glared at the goth, looking for all intent he was insecting her for lies. Lancer said sarcastically, "I am sure you were, Ms. Mason. Next thing you'll tell me is that Mr. Fenton is invisible." All three kids paled dramatically at the unknowingly correct statement. The dumb name for Danny Phantom and Danny Phantom was Danny Fenton. Sam managed a rather shaky laugh and tried to keep calm. "Oh, of course not, Mr. Lancer. There's no way Danny could be invisible. There is no way the loser could be invisible," put in Paulina, her eyes shining brightly. "After all, Invisible's so strong and handsome, not at all like the freak." The older man scowled. "Thank you, Paulina. That reminds me." The balding man pulled out a sheet of paper from his desk. "Principal Smith has given me a few words for a forbidden list she's created." Dash's handsome face screwed up as he thought hard. "But isn't that obstruction of freedom of speech or something?" "Correct, Dash," Mr. Lancer answered, hauncily surprised. "However, the principal has put these along with cuss words, such as the F-bomb. Ahem. The words include freak, loser, scum, trash, geek, fag, nigger, nerd, dork, loony, queer, and monster. This is not the cohesive list. Ask the principal if you want it." The students stared at him. Sam's blackened lip formed an O. Tucker was about to fall out of his chair. Paulina had paused mid-stroke while polishing her nails, and Dash was blinking in surprise. Danny was by far the funniest. He was frozen in his position, head half perked off of his slack fist, face rather stiff with shock. Crash Tucker finally fell out his seat. The class snapped out of their shock to laugh at the blushing boy as he scrambled back up to his seat, in embarrassment. the African American attempted to pull his beret further down his head. Mr. Lancer made no move to stop them, but instead smirked at the boy's misfortune. Turning around, the teacher began to write on the board, acting oblivious to Tucker's embarrassment. "I hate Mr. Lancer," Tucker mumbled, red still evident on his cheeks. Danny made a face, especially since he caught the sneer the man made when he said, "queer," and "fag." Resting his head on his fist, he murmured back, "Ditto." Surprisingly, Sam didn't add in her 2 cents, she just scrunched up her nose in distaste as she pretended to listen to whatever Mr. Lancer was droning on about. The 3 friends honestly tried to pay attention to the lesson, but Danny had to admit to himself that he had no idea what was going on. The second class wasn't any better. The boy kept wondering why the hell the woman from Knockling was here. Sighing, he pretended to pay attention to the robot disguised as a teacher as he wondered if the past is going to catch up to him. Well, it has been 2 years, thought Danny, and last year was the year I got my ghost powers. Makes sense that nothing normal could ever happen to me. "Mr. Fenton," monotoned the teacher, "will you please do the problem on the board?" It took a moment for Danny to realize the man was talking to him. I am not sure how to, sir." The teacher's eyebrows rose but his voice showed no sign of surprise. "You don't know?" "No sir," he said, embarrassed and blushing. A sneer curled around the mon's thin lips. "Figures." Danny's mouth dropped. There was absolutely no way this could happen. All he could think was, great, it's me against the world again. But this time, there's Sam and Tucker instead of. No, don't go there. It's been 2 years, 2 effing years, and there's no reason to go back into depression. There is no reason to. That chapter of my life is supposed to be over and done with. I don't want to remember. Not the people and above all, not him. But every time I turn around, I can't help but remember every shitty moment. What the hell can I do about it? Giving up on even the pretense of paying attention, Danny tried to fight back the bad memories. He finally came back down to earth while walking down to the auditorium. "Wait, where are we?" "Jesus Danny, are you doing drugs again?" joked Sam. Although her violet eyes betrayed her worry, "We're going to hear the official introduction of Principal Smith." "Which I see no point of." A new voice cut in just as Tucker opened his mouth. "They all know I am here. Might as well say I am going to take over the world with all the attention I am getting." Tucker nearly fell over for the second time today, but straightened back up quickly. He yelled at the tiny woman, "Where the heck did you come from? Sometimes you need to just open your eyes. The answer could have been in front of you the entire time." The pretty woman informed him wisely, but betrayed the gravity of her statement by throwing her arms up and around Danny's shoulders. Danny stiffened at the unexpected contact from the older woman. Not to be rude or anything like that, but can you please get off of me? That is setting a horrible example for the kids." A cold voice broke in. Mr. Lancer, in his overweight glory, stared down his squared nose to the new principal. "Please restrain yourself from showing such blatant favorism." Acting like he owned the world and wasn't a hypocrite for saying that. The man turned a heel and walked to the entrance to the stage. It was obvious he expected Mrs. Smith to follow meekly behind. As soon as the teacher turned, the principal stuck out her tongue at his back. Sam choked at first, but then happily copied her. Tucker began to grin, taking care to stuff his fist into his mouth before giggles escaped him. On the other hand, Danny was in no position to express amusement. At the moment, he is being suffocated by the surprisingly strong arms wrapped around his neck. "Need, please." Mrs. Smith blushed lightly as she realized what she was doing. Releasing her favorite person, she smoothed her plain brown skirt. Winking, she said, "Wish me luck." Watching her go, Sam's eyes shined happily. "I take back whatever I said about her. That lady rules. She is awesome." Tucker agreed happily before overreacting at the time and forced them into the introduction. Grabbing seats in the back, they sat back to watch the show. "Good morning, my beloved students," Principal Smith beamed joyously to her audience. "Although, I have doubted that phrase and sentiment for the longest time. Honestly, what sort of morning is good? It's more like hell on earth. Oh, do sit down, Mr. Lancer. There's no need for you to be uncomfortable. I insist." "Oh, right, I'll get on with it. I am Principal Smith. If you had half a brain to remember, please. I am giving you a compliment. There's no need to be huffy." "Geez. Nay, I originated from Knockling. Funny place that is. This place would probably be stranger. Well, I don't feel like giving out any more personal information, so I'll let you all in on my plan. Now a majority of you are near the failing point. Unacceptable. Since I am a new and mostly neutral party, I shall give each and every one of you a chance at extra credit." She grinned at the cheering audience. "However, I will not disclose the information at this moment, because of few wrinkles in the plan that need to be ironed out. It will be posted tomorrow. Okay. I am done with this. Hasta la vista, baby. Without any looks back, Mrs. Smith left. Mr. Lancer leapt out of his chair in attempt to stop her. I have a feeling school is going to get a little more interesting, commented Sam as she watched the cackling woman being chased by the overweight man. A small smile and a shake of his head, Danny answered, of course it will. A teenager sprang up from his bed as incessant beeping filled the bedroom, bleary blue eyes opened to search the room as the annoying beeps filled the air. Danny. An irate voice, his sister, called up. Get it in gear and turn off that alarm. That's such an annoying noise. Who on earth did you get that from? Blinking blearily, Danny ignored his sister's question in order to get up, smacked the alarm a little too hard, and shut the damn annoying noise off. Staring at the door, Danny stood there, deciding whether or not the lure of sleep was more feasible than wakefulness. Deciding he didn't want to face the world just yet, the ghost boy fell back into the beautifully warm bed to head off to Lullaby Land. Daniel Fenton. You better have not gone back to bed. Really, God should be more considerate than to give insightful sisters screeching lungs, or better yet, have not gave anyone that screech at all. If you've gone back to sleep, I am calling Sam. Blue eyes flew wide open in fear. The boy all but leapt out of the bed and ran to the bathroom. Smirking, the redhead couldn't stop herself from muttering after hearing a loud crash of her brother colliding with the door, and then the bathroom taps turn. Works every time. Danny turned off the run of water. Glancing up, the boy watched his own downbeat face. Water dripping off of his hair and down his face. For a moment, Danny thought he saw the face that haunted his dreams the most, a boy, or a young teenager, with a small happy smile in calm brown eyes and fair hair framing his face. Sharply shutting his eyes to block the beautiful boy from his vision, Danny's head fell to his hands that were clenched to the bleach-white edges of the sink. The boy slightly sucked in needed air, then sighed. Standing back up, he left the bathroom, pointedly ignoring the mirror. As Danny walked down the stairs, his sister stuck her head into the living room. I am going to head to school in about 5 minutes. Do you want to come with me or fly? The boy managed to gather up a passable smile for the pretty red head. I think I'll come with you, Jazz. I kind of want to talk about our new principal. Jazz wrinkled up her nose and went back to the kitchen while still saying, that lady gave me a heart attack when she went up to the podium, and left it before the speech was supposed to be over. I swear, she winked straight at me. At least she didn't point you out in front of a group from your grade, groused Danny as he fetched a piece of toast and slathered on a healthy amount of peanut butter on it. Remember when she decided to give me the birds and the bees talk? The older girl blushed at the embarrassing memory. Yes, I do. I remember it much too clearly. I don't think I could look at her or you in the eye for about a week. Danny laughed as well and blushed slightly red too. You couldn't look at her in the eye. I couldn't stop thinking about the stingers and stingers when I looked at. A small sad noise emerged from the back of Jazz's throat as she watched her brother clam up. Even after a year out of the evil depth of Knockling, Danny still thought of him regularly whether he wanted to or not. Danny. Are you okay? You have to know, it's good to remember the happy times, little brother. Shaking his head, Danny only offered a very small and sad smile with just a lame joke about how she should use that line when she becomes a psychologist. Jazz bit her lip but silently followed her brother out of the door before she said something. In the small pink car, the silence held while Jazz backed out and started to drive. Finally, Danny broke the silence to wonder aloud. I wonder what Mrs. Smith will do next. Jazz focused on the road but allowed herself to smile at her brother's voice and answered with an air of experience. Well, it is obvious it will be completely insane, it's just. The girl was unable to finish her thought, because at that moment, a booming voice roared over the road. I am Technus. I am the master all of technology and all things electronic and beeping, and shall very soon take over the world through your own technology. Bow down, you pitiful homo sapiens. Of course, hell come out now, huffed Danny. Will you excuse me, Jazz? The girl rolled her eyes but nodded, obviously a little worried about Danny and probably him being late to school. Awkwardly standing up in the cramped car, Danny clenched his fists as he called out, I am going ghost. As the cry faded, a bright white light in shape of a ring encased him around the middle. The ring spilt in 2 separate circles, one traveling down to his feet and the other one up to his head. As they passed over, his white t-shirt and blue jeans became black spandex with the emblem of Danny Phantom, complete with white boots and form-fitting gloves. As the light disappeared, white hair settled to gently frame his paler face as he snapped open glowing green eyes. Becoming intangible, Danny jumped up and flew through the roof of the car. Flying through the air, he glared at the ghost who decided to pop up, materializing. The ghost boy snarled, you know it's very bad for my school life when you annoying ghosts start to show up. Ah, Danny Phantom. The ugly ghost that communicated through a TV screen on a huge robot's chest sneered. It is time I put my plan of trapping you in the computer game, Final Fantasy X, and to send viruses that will suck all the power out of the computers in the world while you are distracted to take over the world. Thanks for telling me the plan, my adversary, but isn't that idea just a bit dicey, considering you've never actually beaten me before? Sweetly smirked Danny. For a moment, Technus frowned, trying to decipher any hidden meanings in what the boy have said. Then his face blushed a tomato red, definitely looking somewhat sickly against his bright green skin. Well, it doesn't matter. I will defeat you puny little ghost boy and take over the world. Danny opened his mouth to retort an assuredly witty statement but was forced to dodge an eco-blast that emerged from the many wires floating around. The ghost boy shot out his arms in front of his body to aim his clamped fists at the computer ghost. Green light began to glow outwards in a visible circle before narrowing into a beam, rushing at the slightly cowed ghost. The light flashed in powerful contact and Technus was forced to reel to the side. The ghost decided this would be a good time to tactfully retreat. Danny cursed under his breath as he realized his blast had only clipped the machine and his adversary was running away, still swearing. The boy gave chase. They ended up about 6 miles in the opposite direction of the school. After flying through countless buildings they would have undoubtedly smashed if they were solid. Danny finally found a stretch of land which he could beat on the other ghost without busting any human or inanimate objects. Putting on a burst of speed, the teenager caught up and grabbed the fleeing robot ghost. In one deft move, he twisted his body to use momentum to throw the heavier object backwards into the ground. For a moment, the older ghost bemoaned dramatically how he was sure to have broken something, and it was probably expensive, and the boy better pay for it, even if the ghost himself actually just stole it in the first place. Danny couldn't help but roll his eyes. You're worse than children, I know. Before he zoomed down to the ground, using gravity as an aid to punch through the TV monitor on the robot, the image dissolved to gray static with electricity dancing around the jagged edge of the puncture and finally died to just a black screen. Mindless of reddish-green blood sliding over his torn white gloves, Danny only withdrew his hand as the robot gave one last pathetic twitch. Reaching behind himself, Danny attempted to grope for the backpack containing Fenton thermos, the thermos his parents invented to capture and hold ghosts until they could release them back into the ghost portal. The boy groaned as he realized he left both the objects he desired in Jazz's car. Slightly slumping, the ghost boy tried to think up what he should do to make sure the ghost couldn't come back and terrorize the city more. If I was a half-crazed, idiotic, super evil ghost that lives in a computer and trying to take over the world while looking stupid, what sort of backup plan would I have? I couldn't be killed but my data could be erased so he'll have to save it on something ancient. Danny's green eyes snapped open as he shouted out, a floppy disk. Scrambling, the boy fumbled around the buttons flashing pitifully across the robot's makeshift chest. Finding a slit wide enough for the backup drive, he impatiently jabbed the button, forgetting it needed power to eject it. After poking the button 6 times in quick fashion, Danny lost his patience. The ghost boy dug his fingertips into the slit in the metal and pulled, making it wide enough to slip his tattered hand in. A smug smile grew upon Danny's face as he retracted his hand with his fist clenched around a black floppy disk. He winced slightly as he finally noticed the slightly green blood trickling down his white glove and the small sharp pain that accompanied it. However, the boy's reaction was only to give one immature, but satisfying kick to the heap of scrap metal. Finally, the boy glanced up to look around an unfamiliar landscape. He blinked once, trying to process where he was. Shivers racked his body as he realized, oh God, Mrs. Smith is going to kill me. With that thought in mind, Danny ran off to the direction the school was, ignoring the twinges of pain in his hand that allowed red-green blood to run down his hand to stain the formerly white glove. As soon as the first crack that led into a ramp came up, the ghost boy leapt up and then flew so fast he almost flickered out of sight. After a moment of his departure, a figure stepped out into the partial destruction. The person looked to the clouds for a moment then slumped over, dark hair covering the shadowed as he sighed. Out loud he said, the first lesson will be in a greater finesse. The wreckage of metal that was the former technological ghost glowed bright green for a moment then disappeared along with the unfamiliar man. The boy phantom landed in the area of slight overgrowth in the yard in front of the school. Lights appeared in ring around the ghost again and split in two, revealing his human side this time. The teenager ran up school and grabbed his backpack perched in the spot that he and Jazz agreed to leave in case there was fight while leaving or coming to school. He tossed the pack over his shoulder and ran to his first period class. You are so late. I do not know why you bother coming to school if you're going to be late every single day. Detention. For every day this week. Mr. Lancer had a freakin' powerful voice. Danny blinked at him and shrank back, I am, sorry? Sorry. Sorry. Barked Mr. Lancer, his lips curled into a sneer, like hell a delinquent like you is sorry. Why couldn't you be more like your sister? At least she's. Suddenly, a hell of a more scary presence burst into the room, make the ranting teacher jump. Mr. Lancer. Is this any way to treat students? Haven't you seen he's injured? The students, who were giggling at Danny's predicament, fell silent before you could say detention. The tiny women had that effect, and she had power to keep them from school clubs. The person that was being argued over just blinked, looking down at his hand. He was surprised to find the blood had gone to the pure red all humans held in their body and was dripping down his hand to create small puddles. You are a freaking idiot. Why the hell did you become a teacher? You don't even notice a wound that is pouring out blood, shrieked Principal Smith. Mr. Lancer gave up all signs of sucking up, like you're any better. You wouldn't have noticed if it was your special Daniel Fenton? I effing would. Like hell you would. Oh, Danny interrupted unintentionally. I hadn't even noticed I was bleeding this much. That was all it took for the new principal to drag him off. The class watched in shock as the tiny woman dragged the slightly bigger boy off to God knows where, and Mr. Lancer twitched. All right, you maggots. Back to class now. Sit there, the woman ordered Danny. He sat down on the strangely comfy chair in front of the principal's desk. The principal herself opened one of the drawers to pull out some slightly old-fashioned bandages while sitting in her own chair. Ripping open to the clean white gauze, she said, "Put your hand on top of my desk." The boy leaned forward to follow her command. Principal Smith took the hand and to wipe the blood off with a towel she had and began to wrap it. Danny watched the skilled hands pass the bandage over and under the hands but almost missed her question. Do you try to do this much damage to yourself, or is it just dumb luck? Danny wrenched his attention away from the wrapping to blink at the formidable woman. What exactly do you mean, ma'am? I mean, Mrs. Smith gripped the bandage tightly as she visibly tried to collect her thoughts. I always see you wounded, or worse. Did you try to injure yourself again? Danny tugged his other arm away to his body, the one with the light blue sweatband around the wrist, to say defensively, it's not that. I just didn't notice it. Mrs. Smith leapt up from her chair. She tightened her grip around the boy's wrist to pull him up nose to nose. You didn't notice? She growled. Danny. I followed a trail of blood to Lancer's office. I didn't notice. Thanks to your husband, I have a high pain tolerance, remember? Yelled Danny. Then he paled, as he tried to push back painful memories. The principal paled as well but didn't halt in bandaging his arm. Danny, regardless of what my S.O.B. did in the past, you can't just ignore pain. It's there to tell you something's wrong, so listen to it. You might have not lost so much blood then. Danny ignored her and slumped into the chair. The woman sighed as she tucked the last bandage into place. Suddenly she smiled disarmingly but scarily. The boy slouched further back into the chair, his blue eyes wide in fear. What? Well, since you're here now, I'll begin the announcement I've been saving all day, said Mrs. Smith cheerfully. She grabbed the old-fashioned black microphone to make it screech. Oops, sorry. Attention, students. Well, freshmen mostly, so the other grade levels can go back to normal stuff as I talk at you. Anyway, it has been decided. My original extra credit project is now part of the curriculum and you shall fail if you don't do as you're told by me. Also, I will make sure you'll never get on a team or club again even if everyone says you're the damn best. Will you look at that? I don't care. In case you're wondering, it is a relationship-oriented project. But when I say that, I mean of the boyfriend, girlfriend variety. You shall be assigned a significant other of my choice. Danny gaped at the woman as she leapt on the desk and raised her hand in a V for victory to an invisible audience before saying half admirably, you really are insane. Mrs. Smith chose to ignore him. I spent all night toiling on this, so you punks better be grateful. I have posted a bulletin on the hallway in front of the cafeteria. Go look for it at lunch. You can't miss it. The boys were listed in alphabetical order by last name, so don't look for your own name, ladies. Have a nice day. Another screech signified the end of the speech when she placed the microphone back in its pouch and she turned to smile at Danny. Why don't you run along to next period? For the next 2 periods, the half-ghost twitched in his seat, wondering what the hell Principal Smith was going to do that was going to ruin his life. Danny worried so much, he almost missed the looks of disdain his arithmetic teacher and biology teacher bestowed upon him and his arm. The boy slouched further in his seat amid his classmates' giggles as they called impossible question to him, like, what is x if the cubed root of 959x equaled 3? Or please describe the chemical reactions of photosynthesis in an evergreen tree. After those questions, Danny fled to his friends and lunch. This day better not get any worse. Can you imagine what this project is going to be like? Tucker asked excitedly, missing Danny's depressed stature and statement. What if I get paired up to Valerie? Or Paulina? They have to act like a girlfriend. Oh my god, this is gold. Danny, are you alright? You look even more tired than yesterday, the slightly more observant Sam asked. As in bonus, she whacked Tucker in the back of the head as he began to drool over the thoughts of hot girlfriends. Danny managed a small smile at the gothic girl. It's okay, techno freak. No, not you, Tucker. Managed to escape again, and some teachers don't really like me, but it's okay. Hey, you actually got your hand bandaged, gasped Sam. Tucker looked too, his brown eyes widening. Hey, yeah. Usually Sam has to beat over the head to get a normal band-aid, but this looks professional. Was it that bad? No. Danny shook off their worry. Mrs. Smith decided to kidnap me from Lancer, although saved might be the more technical term, and wrapped me up. Then she did that speech in front of me. Sam clucked her tongue as she tried not to imagine what that must have been like for her best friend. Tucker slapped the other boy's shoulder in a sympathetic gesture. It was nice knowing you, man. Shut up. It's not like I am going to die. Playfully snapped Danny as he pushed back. Sam rolled her violet eyes as the two teen boys began to wrestle. Without even bothering to talk, the girl whopped them both, then dragged them to the cafeteria. As they got there, they halted in surprise. Sam muttered, "You can't miss it, my ass." The goth couldn't have been more right. The stark white poster took up half the hallway space with just the "Look at me, puny freshman. I am right here" sign. Danny shuddered with his black hair flopping over his eyes. Tucker grunted and forced a smile. Why don't we look at it? It can't be that bad, right? Muttering for a moment, Sam split off to scan for her name while both Tucker and Danny headed towards the F's. Danny took the upper part for Faye S and Tucker looked for Fo S. Fokker, Folklin, Fola, Foley, Foley, Tucker, hell yes. Sanchez, Paulina. The hottest girl in school has to be my girlfriend. Tucker danced in joy as a huge grin burst on his face. Congratulations, I can't seem to find Fenton, Danny muttered. A whiny voice interrupted Danny. No. You can't pair me up with techno freak here. I'll die before I even get my shipping of Lola Reynard's designer boots. Guess what? We don't care. Snarled Sam as she came up to the group. Do you two know anyone named Nanner Ryan? One of Dash's football buddies that came with the pretty Latina girl frowned. He was a tall African American with strong biceps, and said, "That's me." According to the principal, we're a couple from now on, Sam told him, distaste very evident on both of their faces. Dash lumbered up. Huh. You two are stuck with those losers. Sucks to be you. Hey, Quan got star and it looks like they're very happy about it. Yo, Danny. This principal is whack, cried Valerie, a pretty and dark-skinned girl who used to be best friends with Paulina before she lost her money and became friends with Danny. It's a long story. She paired me up with Mikey. Paulina gasped in sympathy before she remembered she wasn't talking with the new loser, and both of the football jocks winced. Sam forewent her distrust of the girl and embraced her while Tucker gave a weak smile. Danny also hugged Valerie briefly before stepping back. Sorry about it, she is insane. I can't even find my name. Should be right behind Fencent. Have you tried looking for Fentina? Joked Dash. He ignored the dirty looks he got from the group of friends and snickered right along with the 2A list group. Let's see who's the lucky lady for Dashman. Dashman? Snorted Sam, and even Valerie forgot her despair to giggle with her. What the hell? Dashman. But Dash already had headed for Baxter and looked for his significant other, and looked, and blinked to look again. His face went red and he growled out, Fenton, Daniel. A beat. Shock settled over the small group of friends and enemies in the form of mutual speechlessness. They all were staring at the poster that innocently correlated Dash Baxter. Danny Fenton. Sclera entirely encompassed his blue irises when Danny turned to glance at the equally stunned Dash. However, the blonde was obviously recovering from his shock, indicated by his tightly clenched fists. I am not a faggot, the popular jock snarled, his gaping mouth twisted into an ugly sneer. Both of his friends voiced their agreement, with a dramatic variation of volume. Paulina screeched and Ryan nodded. But Dash wasn't listening to their support. The teenager turned to glare at the small boy that the poster proclaimed as his girlfriend. Boyfriend. Whatever, it didn't matter. What the hell did you do, Fentina? He didn't do anything. His gothic friend spat out. Why do you think he wants you as a significant other? Danny glared at her as she stumbled over the words he knew could cause the girl to potentially blurt out his secret to the dumb blonde jock. Believe it or not, He didn't want the meanest and strongest bully in the school who has a huge vendetta of unknown origins against him to know he was gay. Danny and Sam both set their mouths into an identical firm line to glare up at the seething blonde. However, Tucker never really knew when was a good time to shut up. Yeah. After all, you beat the crap out of him every day. Why on earth would he like you? He's not even gay. A small blush bloomed in Danny's cheeks as he kicked Tucker. He tried to quiet him with a hissed, not helping. Paulina was the only one to show reaction to the yelping African American. She leaned away with a scowl etched on her pretty face. On the other hand, Ryan didn't even scowl. His face was impassive as he gazed on the three dubbed losers. Dash scowled at Danny, ignoring the whimpering geek as well. However, without a word, he turned on his heel and took off in the opposite direction. Paulina and Ryan both looked at his back in confusion before the Latina girl huffed irately and pulled her African American friend with her into the cafeteria. Danny followed the furious jock in worry, barely noticing his friends trailing behind. However, the taller and sturdier boy made longer strides, so by the time Danny caught up with him, Dash was already throwing open Mrs. Smith's office door. "Where the hell are you?" roared Dash, his blue eyes narrowed and meaty fists practically white. Danny edged around him, trying not to call the angry blonde's attention to his puny figure. Mrs. Smith sat poised in her very comfy chair, hands folded together on the desk, and chin tilted up defiantly. The principal asked in a pleasant tone, "Ah, Mr. Baxter. I was expecting you some time later. Nevertheless, why don't you tell me why are you here?" "Cut out the bull," the jock bellowed. "What the hell is up with your project? Are you trying to imply I am a fag?" "Quite the opposite. Honestly, with this project, I hope to cut down the prejudice in this school that seems to have run unattended for a while." "Maybe make some changes," answered Mrs. Smith, her voice becoming hard with every word. Her folded hands had disappeared under the desk, but Danny noticed her muscles in her arms tensing. Sam and Tucker finally made it to the office, managing to stand next to Danny, unnoticed by the other occupants. The two friends didn't even try to talk, not wanting to catch the attention of the furious bully, instead opting to watch the scene unfold with awe. "Prejudice? That's no god reason to kick me off the team and then tell me to act all couple Y to a boy. This is a cruel and unusual punishment." Dash snarled at the small principal, his tanned face reddening to a puce color. Frowning, Mrs. Smith snapped back, "My punishment was kicking you off the team, perfectly valid from my point of view considering the harassment so many freshmen have come forth with that originated from you. It hasn't even been 2 months since school started. I've even seen you bully kids and it hasn't been a day." The bully honestly looked baffled by this but shook it off to growl at her, "My father will hear about this." Mrs. Smith surprised them both by smiling widely and saying, "Why don't you call him right now? I am sure the secretary would be happy to lend you the school phone." Dash gaped, completely lost for words at the blatant dismissal. The jock visibly pulled himself together as he drew up to his full imposing height. He glared at the small principal, but she somehow still smiled serenely like a mother indulging her indignant toddler. Without another word, Dash stormed out of the room to the secretary's desk. The three teenagers shifted uncomfortably, ignored by the principal. Sam glanced at the clock and exclaimed, "Lunch is almost over. If we don't go right now, we won't get any food." That sentiment clinched Tucker's desire to leave the increasingly awkward situation. The African American was out the door and down the hall faster than you could say hamburger. Sam also went, glancing over her shoulder to Danny, who just smiled and shooed her out. The goth rolled her purple eyes but nevertheless followed her effervescent friend who was singing something to do with meat and the emperor of the world. Danny turned back towards the principal, still feeling awkward. Mrs. Smith looked up and smiled at her student. Mr. Fenton, please join your friends at lunch, you really don't have much time." The boy was about to accept the assurance when the principal removed her hands from behind a desk to reach for some papers. Danny saw 4 red crescent-shaped punctures on her palm before Mrs. Smith grabbed the sheets, startled. The student glanced down at his own bandaged hand before giving a soft sigh, plopping down onto one of the chairs in front of the desk. Danny ignored Mrs. Smith's startled look in favor of asking, "How long have you been in town? Have you contacted my mom yet?" The principal's strained face lightened at the mention of Maddie. The women had grown close in the short year the Fentons were in Knockling. "No. I haven't seen her in forever." "Hey, an idea. Why don't you call her and ask her to come here?" I think I need her permission for this anyway." Danny couldn't help but smile at her blundering explanation but got up to phone his mom. When he left the office, the student ran right into the jock. Regaining his balance, Danny returned a scowl to the blonde. "Were you eavesdropping?" Dash gave the boy his impressive scowl and said, Why should I listen to a dork and a hag? Shut up, snapped Danny, already heading to the secretary desk. Before he could take 2 steps beyond the boy, Dash grabbed his shoulder, drew him back, and hissed in his ear, "But I am positive a few people will like to know the fact she would favor your family over everyone else's." Biting his lower lip so he wouldn't say something he'd regret, namely either where Dash should put that comment or how much he resembled a warthog, but Danny threw the boy a dirty look as he removed himself from the situation. Pausing as he composed himself and squelched the remaining anger, Danny smiled at the lady behind the desk. "Excuse me, can I borrow the phone?" The elderly woman looked at him over his bifocals and only corrected, "May I borrow the phone?" Danny suppressed an eye roll, knowing the lady could take away the privilege because she thought he was insubordinate, and only dutifully repeated, "May I borrow the phone?" "Yes," she answered with a smile, making her face even more wrinkled than it already was. "Yes, you may." Danny immediately took the phone, not wanting to test her patience. Quickly dialing his number, he waited for Mom to pick up. "Hello? Is this the company with our shipment of metal? You are already 2 days late," the rekiver screamed, making Danny and the secretary jump. She gave the student a glare, as if he could make the other person see it. Wincing, Danny cut off the babble. "Dad?" Jack stopped mid-word to say, "Oh, Danny, you'll never guess what I just made. You see, it makes the ghosts." "That's great, Dad," interrupted Danny again. "Is Mom there? Can you put her on?" "Oh, Maddie went off to check on the metal shipments. Aren't you supposed to be in school?" asked Jack as it dawned on him. "Are you in trouble?" "No one will harm you on my watch. It'll be over as soon as possible." "No, Dad," yelled Danny, but the exuberant man had already hung up and was probably out the door. The boy looked at the phone wondering just what happened when a man stormed into the room, with thinning blonde hair, a beer belly, and a jersey. There was no doubt who the man was related to. He crossed the room with long strides and smacked the hands on the secretary's desk and yelled, "Where's the bitch who calls herself the principal?" The woman's scowl made it obvious she was only cooperating to get rid of this excuse of a man, right in that room. Without sparing the occupants another glance, Mr. Baxter stomped to the room. Danny hurriedly hung up the phone and sprinted behind the surprisingly fast man. He made it to witness the fist blow up. "You, edited out 'cause I hate these words. You cannot be stupid enough to kick my boy off the team and then expect him to play fag for you? Mr. Baxter. If you cannot conduct yourself properly at this time, I will ask you to leave until you are able to compose your temper," snapped Mrs. Smith, standing behind the desk, her entire body tense. The middle-aged man literally snarled at the woman, "You kick my son, the star quarterback, off the team." Mrs. Smith cut him off, "Because he behaved just as you are right now, ignoring a direct order because he thinks his abilities put him above the rules. I will not stand senseless violence, so sit down." Startled, all the males sat, almost missing the chairs entirely. The diminutive woman, barely a half an inch taller than Mr. Baxter, seemed to tower over them with a glower. A moment of full silence passed before the principal smiled to cut the tension. "There, isn't that better?" As she sat, Danny sneaked a glance at the Baxters. Both seemed temporarily cowed by the intense lady, but the elder seemed to be coming out of it. "Now your complaints?" "No, I remember the first one. Your son is no longer on the football team as punishment for disobeying my rule within the hour. It is unfortunate, but I do need to enforce rules." Mr. Baxter had grown steadily red as Mrs. Smith explained until his face was an ugly puce color. At the end he blew up, "For not following a damn rule? Once? You give detentions, not remove a star player." "Oh no, not once," Mrs. Smith corrected. "From previous reports, Mr. Baxter has been involved in bullying events over hundreds of times since this year had begun. With a track record like that, I don't believe a detention will curb it, do you?" The man sputtered, "Well, no, but the game's football." Mrs. Smith said firmly, "Is just a game. If Mr. Baxter conducts himself, he can be back on next year." "Next year?" Both son and father chorused, horrified. Danny himself gaped at the terrifying, if short, woman in the chair. "Now to the next matter." Mrs. Smith smiled. "Mr. Baxter's extra credit with Danny here." "Extra credit?" repeated Mr. Baxter, in relief. "Well, he only don't have to do it." Mrs. Smith shook her head. "Considering your son's report card, he needs this as much as Mr. Fenton. It could raise the D's and F's to B's and C's." "But why a fag? Just do girl, boy like you did to everyone else," yelled the man. "I actually have 2 reasons for that," smiled Mrs. Smith. "First of all, it's a project where you pair up with someone you may not be compatible with at first glance. Mr. Baxter has had a track record with almost every girl in the school. Frankly, I fear for either pregnancy or injury if I keep the boy and girl trend." "What?" roared Mr. Baxter. "Are you implying?" "Yes, Mrs. Smith interrupted smoothly to Dash's embarrassment and Danny's sudden glee. "Secondly, the two students are frankly the ones with the lowest grades. For the experiment, tolerance is tested. This is why so many points are given." "No. I refuse," began Mr. Baxter. However, it wasn't Mrs. Smith who cut him off but Jax bounding in the room. Spotting Danny, he grabbed his son in iron grip. "Are you in trouble?" "What's going on?" "You're not having trouble." "I thought you called your mom," groaned Mrs. Smith softly. She gave a smile more like a grimace to the man who always managed to give her a headache whenever he's around. "Ah, Mr. Fenton. Why don't you sit? Your son's not in trouble." "Oh," said Jack as he released Danny, sitting, his eyebrows knitted in confusion as he asked, "Then why did Danny call me?" Before Mrs. Smith could answer, Mr. Baxter snapped, "Because she wants to put our sons in a faggot relationship." Jack smiled and nodded but then frowned. "Are you the Baxters?" "Yeah." The adult answered in confusion. "Ah, then I refuse that," said Jack, smiling again. "Are you insulting us?" Jack answered, "No, I just don't want Danny in an abusive relationship even if Mrs. Smith wants him to be." "How about this?" began Mrs. Smith, interrupting the two loud men. "As long as Mr. Baxter agrees to attempt this social experiment, I'll allow him back on the football team. However, if I hear about a single incident involving bullying or abuse of any form, he will not be allowed back on the team until next season. Is that understood?" Jack agreed readily. Proud his son could be with someone even as part of school, Mr. Baxter had to weigh his options before hesitantly nodding. Danny sighed in resignation. He knew that Mrs. Smith would get her way even if she had to give up some pawns. Dash was obviously unhappy with acting couple Y with the loser but was mollified that his friends would be part of it too and he could be back on the team. He needed to be on the team. Happily, Mrs. Smith shooed them out saying that the students needed to go back to class. As they left, she rubbed her hands together with unholy glee. It was about time she could meddle in the adorable boy's life. Danny felt he could never be more grateful than the moment school ended on this disastrous day. All his stuff cramped in his ratty backpack, Danny quickly made his way to the back of the school, intending on not meeting anyone, especially Dash. The half-ghost's sudden and unwanted boyfriend had looked ready for murder when they left Mrs. Smith's office but had enough self-control not to in the vicinity of the evil principal and his father, so Danny could slip away before the parents left. The half-ghost didn't want to meet anybody, pertaining that the athlete he was dating was star of the football and basketball team, and therefore the popular scene, causing many people, even those who had never really met the blonde adolescent, to hate the smaller boy merely on principle. Before people could travel down this hall to get out of the mess that was the dismissal of school, Danny ducked behind a convenient dumpster right outside the rear entrance, shouting out his catchphrase. A ring of light washed over his body. In just a moment, Danny stood in spandex and with different coloring. The ghost grabbed his backpack and turned invisible to fly in peace. That serenity didn't last long. Without any finesse, an explosion came from a building from down the street. Danny released a small sigh but like the dutiful little superhero he is, the ghost dropped his backpack and flew to the burning building. Flitting about outside, he listened. A distant scream reached his ears, causing the boy to fly up into the smoky office building. With the limited visibility, all the ghost could do was follow the voice whose scream already tampered off into choked sobs. He flew through 3 floors, listening and dodging the falling pillars on fire. On the 8th or so floor, he finally found a young woman, tugging an unconscious old man towards the door. Danny seized the two people, wrenching them apart, throwing the woman over his shoulder and tucking the elder under his arm. The boy fled the building, flying through the non-burning wall. Ignoring the woman's shrieks, for a moment, Danny looked over his shoulder to building that was already collapsing under the damage. The boy gently floated down into an alley devoid of people to place the gentleman and woman on the ground. The monk's head lolled as he touched down and the woman's knees gave out when she touched the ground, gaping at the invisible thing that saved them. Finally, her poor shocked body just gave out, flopping to the ground as the eyes rolled back into her head. The boy allowed his body to become human again. Racing out of the alley to where the firefighters and paramedics were stationed, Danny screamed, "Help! 2 people! Hurt! Help!" and led the medic team back into the alley. Before they actually entered the alley, the child jumped and changed in midair to fly away cleanly. "Hey, what was the flash of light? Never mind that. Where's the brat? It better not be another prank or God is my witness." The kid was telling the truth. Someone get those 2 help. But the brats now. Danny flew a couple streets down and landed to turn human and to catch his breath. A steady clap reached his ears and his eyes flew up to meet the unknown audience. A lanky man, tall with nondescript black clothing with an outlandish green hat, stood before the boy. Still clapping steadily with a small smile on his face, he murmured, his voice easily reaching the boy's ears, "Congratulations, Phantom." With one finally clap his eyes opened, his purple eyes staring straight into Danny's blue eyes. They both stood there for some moments, staring. Danny hesitated further before finally saying, "Thank you. But your form is rather off. You don't harness your energy, you haven't even explored and practiced your talents, you're rather weak, and your uniform is rather tacky." The man continued, counting of points on his gloved hand, but the blonde waved his hand, banishing all the poor points, and smiled wider, adding, "Which why I appointed myself to be your trainer." Danny gaped at the man, utterly flabbergasted. "My what? Look, dude, that's, nice and all, but I don't even know your name and oh my, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Ken." The man interrupted happily. "That still doesn't say who you are," muttered Danny, glaring at the man. "Ken? Really?" And scowling. Still smiling, the man suddenly crossed the area separating the two and looped his arm around the boy. Before Danny could either slip out and run away or turn intangible and run away, the street and the buildings twisted, collapsing into itself. The black mass the buildings left behind melted and formed a training yard. Danny ripped himself away from the person and stumbled back, falling to the grassy ground. He slowly rubbed the blades of grass between his fingers, unbelieving that this ground was previously concrete. The blades slipped through his fingers as he stared at the man. What are you? How did you do this?" Looking unperturbed and still smiling, the man chirped, "I told you, I am Ken. As for this, well, the man gave this to me, had some bling like Public Enemy, you know, like a clock." "Clockwork? Did Clockwork send you?" Ken snapped his fingers. "Yeah, that bloke. Scared the wits out of me when he went from a geezer to a brat. Anyway, let's get started." "Danny, get up. You forgot to turn on your alarm. You're going to be late." The boy groaned. He didn't want to move. Moreover, he couldn't move. That bastard worked him over so that it was a feat to open his eyes. "Danny Fenton. If you don't get up now, I am going to leave without you." Sighing, knowing Jazz would go through with her threat, Danny sat up. "Ow. What was that noise?" yelled Jazz. "Nothing." Danny called back, rubbing his popped back, moving sluggishly and heavily. Danny dressed and went downstairs. Before he could find something to eat, Jazz grabbed the back of his shirt and dragged him out. She explained, "No time. Eat something that's in the glove box, we're already late." Danny sat still and for the entire car ride tried to rub feeling back into his numb then aching joints and muscles. His sister stared at him out of the corner of her eye and frowned. "Are you okay? Did you run into any ghosts?" Danny shook his head. "Nah. There was one crazy fellow, but I don't think he's a ghost," adding with a mutter under his breath, "I am not sure what he is." "Oh, well," began Jazz, trying to search for a topic, "did you finish your homework?" Danny sat straight up but had to pause for a groan in answer to his protesting muscles. "I forgot. My backpack. It's outside that building." "What? Where's your backpack?" "I left it at the burning building." "What?" Jazz stared at him then glared. "What are you waiting for? Get it." Following his sister's order, Danny went ghost and raced to the site for the fire. Flying into the area where he first saw the fire, the boy looked around, all over the streets, and in the nearby trash bins. He turned up empty-handed. "Oh God, Lancer is going to kill me." "Detention." The fat bald man screamed at the poor student. Danny hung his head and thought, 98, get to your seat. "I can't believe you were late and forgot your homework," yelled Lancer, "and your precious principal can't get you out of this. You're set for afternoon detention." Danny made his way over to his desk and dropped his head onto the wood, ignoring his friend's sympathetic glances. His body ached. He was dead tired and he had yet another, 98th, detention. Could this day get any worse? Screech, stupid Mike. "Oh, good morning students. Great, it's another beautiful day. The sun is shining, the grass is green, the orange and palm trees swaaaaay. Oh wait, it's neither snowing nor December so I'll stop singing. Anywho, it is a gorgeous day which is why the first task for the extra credit project shall begin. Okay. The first mission you must undertake is, being near your partner." "Oh no. Yes, darlings, you did hear me correctly. Today you must sit with your significant other, in the classes you share, at lunch, and everywhere. Ha ha ha, it shall be an exciting task to get to know your partner, so now get up and move." The class stared at the speaker in a state of shock, including Mr. Lancer. Nobody moved. And you'll be doing random rounds, so sit with your partner now. The class burst into chaotic bustle. Danny slowly made his way over to Dash. Preferring to look to see how his friends were doing, Sam was interlocked with a glaring contest with Ryan before dropping her weight fully on the chair next to the jock somehow in a threatening manner. Tucker was trying to smile at the simmering Paulina but was failing miserably at the face of her anger. The Latina let out a huff and tenderly sat next to the geek. Tucker grinned over his girlfriend at his best friend. Danny tried to give his friend an answering smile but it dropped off when he saw the scowling boy. Gingerly, he perched himself on the chair by the athlete's body, completely stiff in order to avoid any more contact with the boy. Dash whispered into the other's ear, "I'll play along with this game your flipping principal thought up for now, Fentina. But you better watch your back," and pinched his arm sharply to accompany the threat. "Ow," Danny muttered, rubbing his arm. Knowing that Dash was smirking at half-ghost, the boy frowned but paid attention to the front of the classroom. Mr. Lancer scowled at the class, like it was their fault he has to deal with this creature they now call the principal. "I was going to give you a quiz over last night's assignments, but considering your new seating arrangements, that will be counterproductive. Instead, well, take notes following what we did yesterday." Danny tried to follow Lancer, honest, but after a while, the monotonous voice started to make his eyes drift shut and the body next to him was so warm and Fenton. Danny's eyes flew open and he was shocked to realize he was tucked against the jock's shoulder. The boy quickly shot up, knocking his head to Dash's chin. Danny hunched over the desk, gripping at the spot of collision, before looking up to a fuming, red-faced Lancer. The fat man sneered. Bell rang. "Go, now." Embarrassed, Danny leapt out of that room to go to his next class, which thankfully did not have the blonde in. Sam sat next to him, without her partner too, and whispered, "What happened yesterday? You didn't answer any of my calls." Danny shrugged and answered, "Nothing. Yesterday was just kinda weird." Sam frowned at him, but before she could pry further, the bell rang and the teacher started class with a quiz, which Danny failed miserably, of course. "I swear I couldn't remember a thing from this entire year," complained Danny to his two friends on the way to lunch. "I am so tired." Tucker was too busy looking forward to food, but Sam questioned, "What happened yesterday?" "Nothing. I told you already," snapped Danny. Sam glared at him. "I don't like your tone. Here I am, being a friend." "Hello, students." An annoyingly chipper voice rang out. Principal Smith stood just inside the lunchroom, smiling at the trio. "How are we doing this morning? Remember, sit with, giggle, your partner today." In unison, Sam and Danny moaned, but Tucker looked that much happier at the prospect of eating with Paulina. The African-American made his way to buy his lunch while Sam and Danny picked their way to the popular table. Paulina spotted the two first and sneered, "What are you two geeks doing here?" Sam jabbed her thumb over her shoulder to the beaming principal by the door. "It's her fault, not ours." The group groaned and ever so slowly made just enough room for the two to squeeze between Dash and Ryan. Sam opened her lunch of Californian rolls and dumped soy sauce on it. Her boyfriend's nose wrinkled. "What is that and what's that smell?" "Sushi," she said tersely, "and you're smelling vinegar-soaked rice." Star asked curiously, "Isn't that, like, raw fish?" Sam indulged her and answered, "Usually, this one is made with cucumbers, carrots, and other veggies." Quan wrinkled his nose but asked Danny, "Dude, are you eatin'?" "No, I am fat today," he answered with a straight face. The popular table hushed and Paulina asked, "You're anorexic?" "Ignore him," interrupted the goth, shoving her elbow into the boy's side. "He thinks he's funny. It only works on your psychology-obsessed sister." "I am waiting for Tucker," explained Danny. "He either buys too much or he gets something for me since I forget." Tucker popped out from behind one of the jocks, holding a tray with plates stacked with food. Beaming, "I am good for some things." He sat next to Paulina to begin assembling his food. Not soon long after, Tucker pushed a plate of trimmings and bread over to Danny as he kept the tray for his meat sandwich, between two slabs of steak, a couple of burger patties, some hot dogs that were sliced in half for more stability, and a combo of barbecue pork, beef, chicken shredded finishing it off. The people who never associated with him before looked on with a mixture of disgust and awe. Paulina looked on with pure revulsion. "And he eats this every day?" Danny nodded, munching on a lettuce leaf. "Yeah. This for lunch, a couple steaks for dinner, and sausage and bacon." "I forgot bacon," the boy cried, setting his sandwich down carefully and racing back to the lunch line. "For breakfast," finished Danny, taking a bite out of a tomato. Wait, said Ryan. "All he does is geek about a video game or something." "Yes. Doesn't play sports or exercise, so how the hell does he stay so skinny? Sam swallowed her sushi and answered, running in terror, either from me or Danny's house. Paulina and Star awkwardly returned to talking about plans for shopping, and the boys started talking about the championship football game and the opposing team, the Bradford Badgers or something, as the geeks quietly ate. Well, Sam also kicked Danny and glared at him, but they were still quiet and Tucker didn't bother anyone as he focused on his meat sandwich. It was rather peaceful, if a little tense, until Valerie ducked behind Danny. She peeked over his shoulder, eyes darting in utter fear, as she whispered, "Hide me. Mikey's coming." Sam and Danny pushed her under the table. Just as Valerie got her head beneath the table, Mikey sprinted by yelling, "My love. Where are you?" After the danger passed, Valerie popped up, squeezing between Sam and Danny, snagging a tomato slice. "Thanks. The freak has been following me everywhere. I only got away when I sneaked out of the girls' room when he wasn't looking." Ew. Gross. Paulina and Star commiserated until they remembered they weren't talking to the girl, so they turned away in a huff. Valerie ignored her former friends and asked the nerds around a mouthful of food, "So, what's up?" Danny grabbed an onion and shrugged. Tucker still focused on his colossal meat sandwich, which he's only eaten half of so far. Sam frowned at them both but popped another roll in her mouth. Valerie rolled her eyes. "Well, did you hear about the fire yesterday?" "Was it a ghost?" questioned Sam. "Well, I know a ghost was there. A woman who was rescued said she saw the ghost boy before she passed out. In fact," Valerie leaned in closer as though her piece of gossip was a secret, "the police said they found evidence of a person missing in action." "Huh. Basically, someone left something behind at the crime and the police are asking whoever left it to come forward, hopefully with information." "My backpack," yelled Danny, jumping to his feet, nearly upsetting the table. Noticing blank stares directed to him, he hesitated, trying to think of an excuse. Forget it in my last class. I need to get it. See you." Danny raced through the empty hallways to the front of the school, slamming open both of the double doors and running straight into Lancer. The vice principal didn't even rock back as Danny's tush hit the floor. He just crossed his arms and sneered, "Going somewhere?" Absently rubbing his backside, he hit the concrete hard. Danny returned to his feet. No?" Lancer glared, his nostrils flaring with disgust. "So where do you think you're going?" "Back inside?" offered Danny, already creeping backwards. The boy slunk back through the school doors even as Lancer announced, "And serving another detention tomorrow." The bell rang before Danny could decide if he could risk sneaking out as a ghost. The downtrodden boy stole into the room and his seat just before the teacher began class. His desk partner, the ever-loving football player, looked at him contemptuously. "Dude, where's your bag?" "I forgot I left it at home," muttered Danny. Dash chuckled rudely, "Idiot." The day passed slowly for the teenager, getting zeros on homework, sitting through a mind-numbing detention, and his muscles generally refusing to move after the trauma they went through yesterday, and without so much as a ghost to distract him. Sitting by the window, he watched the clouds roll by as Lancer filled the silent room with scratches from his red grading pen. As soon as the boy was released from the tedium, he headed to the police station. A fairly burly man sat behind the desk, munching on fried dough in one hand and typing with his pointer finger on his free hand. "Hi. I think my backpack." "Another backpack claim?" The man grunted. "Go to Officer O'Donnell, third desk on the left." Danny blinked at the dismissal but silently headed further into the station. He came upon a small man with russet hair who positively beamed. "Are you here about the backpack?" At Danny's nod, he asked, "Did you file a missing item claim here?" "Well, no, but look, kid," the man cut him off, losing the smile. "So many people have tried to claim this backpack that it will take me all night to go through the claims. Go fill out another form and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." Danny blanched a little. "Look, my name's Danny Fenton." There was no name on the backpack. "Beat it, I know." Danny snapped irritably, "But inside I had my schoolwork and binders." Which is how the verification process works, since this backpack was dropped at the scene of the crime. It was dropped out in an alleyway. It wasn't actually in the scene of the crime. That rewarded the boy with the policeman's attention. "Well, in that case, if you could come this way, we have some questions to ask you." It took a while to reassure the officers that, no, he didn't have anything to do with the fire. No, he didn't see anyone near the flames, what with being a couple blocks away. And yes, losing the backpack was a completely separate incident. "Could I please have my backpack now, cause it's getting kinda late and my mom and dad would get worried." Yes, Fenton, as in the big neon sign with the crazy kooks inside who most likely can cause everyone in this establishment a serious headache if they come looking for me, including a certain chief. And no, officers, it had been no trouble at all really, sorry I couldn't help. Needless to say, the boy was rather exhausted when he finally left, backpack in tow. Then, for the second time today, he ran straight into somebody. Luckily, he stayed on his feet. Unluckily, he ran into Ken, who was sporting a rather terrifying grin. Oh, no, 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 Danny protested as the blonde grabbed the boy's bicep and began to drag him to a more isolated area. I really can't do this today. I don't care if Clockwork sent you. I am tired and sore and I really don't want to. Ken smiled at him and talked over his pleas. You do the exercises we worked on yesterday and then we'd get down to the really good stuff. The man propelled Danny into an empty building that he commandeered yesterday and yanked the backpack off his shoulder. Go on, and get to it. Danny groaned but went ghost, as he trained in the dusty rooms. Ken took out a very familiar floppy disk and twirled it around his fingers as he headed to a table with a cloth-covered object. Although lacking an audience, he whipped the cloth off with a showy flourish to reveal a limp faceless dummy, humming a pointless melody. The man rolled the dummy to his side and inserted the disc into the small of his back. He dropped it back down, still humming. It clicked and whirled and booted up. The dummy slowly sat up on its own, and Ken couldn't resist cackling. It's alive. The dummy flung his arms open in a grandiose gesture before pausing. Finding something amiss, the hands flung up and frantically clawed his face in the areas his mouth and eyes would be. What the hell is that? Cried Danny, who came to investigate as soon as he heard the man cry. He flew straight at the dummy, his fist clenched and drawn back in. Stop. Danny paused, his fist a mere inch away from the dummy's featureless face. What do you think you were doing? I thought that it was attacking. Scoffing, Ken corrected, it's a training apparatus. What sort of intel did you gather before leaping into the fray? Absolutely none. This is the type of habit we need to break you of. Training apparatus. Repeated Danny, eyeing the dummy that was flaying his hands out wildly in obvious panic. As what? Citizen rescue. Why is it moving like that? Hey, that's a good idea, but no, this will be your sparring partner? Sparring? Ken merely smiled, directing Danny and the awkward mannequin to different sides of the room. He yelled out, begin. Danny woke the next morning already late. He stiffly got up and gathered his uncompleted homework to stuff in his backpack. That stupid dummy. At first, Danny hadn't felt the best about using the punching bag because its sporadic movements just felt like he was bullying some nerd who couldn't fight back. Then suddenly it was as if the object had an epiphany and started shooting freaking ectoplasm blasts. The first one Danny automatically dodged, but then his brain caught up, and while he was freaking out at Ken about the new ability, the second flash caught him right in the gut. Speaking of which, Danny paused in while changing his shirt and poked his now multicolored bruise spread across his stomach and torso. Wincing, the boy decided to forego his usual t-shirt and pulled on one with long sleeves to hide where the stupid dummy clipped him when Ken told him just to work on dodging and not to fight back. Then remembering he was late, the boy raced out of the house and sprinted to school, once again cursing Jazz pet status and going early to help out teachers. Lancer was waiting for him in the empty yard, and Danny knew the day wasn't going to go his way. Danny, one might say you like our little dates like yesterday's. Danny slumped but still tried. Mr. Lancer, please, I was just going to. Lancer's hand gripped the boy's forearm in a flash, right on a fresh bruise. Danny involuntarily made a full-bodied twitch but bit in lip sharply in a refusal to cry out. Already, the teacher's hand was loosening even as he propelled his student out into the school and down the hall to his office. They both entered the barren room silently. Lancer finally released the boy and sat down, but still keeping an eye on him. Danny slowly slipped his backpack off and hesitantly slid in the seat, half believing that if he just went slowly enough, someone, maybe Mrs. Smith, would burst in and save him, but he sat down without any interruption, not meeting the mont's gaze. The two sat there for a full minute quietly and unmoving. Finally, the teacher said snidely that homework is usually done in here, and, knowing Danny, his homework certainly could use the help. Danny refrained from rising to the bait but bent down to open his backpack. Pain flooded through his body along with the urge to puke. Danny gulped wildly to fight that urge but managed to grab the materials and lift them to the desk. Breathing slowly out of his mouth, Danny glanced up to see a raised eyebrow. Averting back to the homework, his bandaged hand fumbling with the pencil, the boy missed the mon's face, betraying angry confusion. Half the day passed, the only noise coming from scratching of pencil on paper, this time only Danny. Several glances up informed the boy that the man simply watched Danny with a superb poker face that must come from years of dealing with teenagers. Finally, Lancer got up and loomed over Danny. The boy looked up just as Lancer seemed to come to a decision. Get up. The student paused in bewilderment but, at Lancer's glower, scrambled to his feet. Lancer folded his arms over his chest, effectively trapping Danny between the big man and the table. So what went on yesterday? At Danny's look, Lancer deigned to explain. I am giving you a chance now. So what happened yesterday to make you late again? I went to the police station, said Danny, not offering any further explanation. Lancer frowned, coming to his own conclusions. Have you gotten any medical attention? What? No, of course not. Lancer removed himself from Danny's personal space in favor of pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. Of course not, he says. Follow me. The teacher only paused long enough at the door for Danny to get his stuff together and then strode purposefully down the corridor. The boy followed but then hesitated when Lancer turned to the nurse's office. Honestly, sir, it's fine. I don't need to. The man didn't suppress an eye roll and propelled the boy into the office. The nurse sat behind the desk, looking up with a smile. What is the problem today? This boy seems to have abrasions of some sort on his chest. Oh, poor boy, did you fall? Take off that shirt so I can see the problem. Danny crossed his arms over his chest and glared. No. No? Repeated an affronted Lancer, looking as if Danny had physically attacked him. Hurriedly, the nurse interjected before the man burst a vein. Ah, let's calm down, shall we? Why don't you tell me your name so I can sign you in? Danny merely tightened his arms. Lancer answered for him, Daniel Fenton. Oh. The nurse exclaimed, so you're the one everyone. She noticed Lancer's eyes widened and cut herself off with a nervous little giggle. The teacher's eyes narrowed again but then closed them with a sign, visibly giving up. He absently dismissed them with a wave of his hand as he headed out the door. The nurse, rather pretty in her own right, invaded his personal bubble. Nose a bare inch from nose. Now, Mr. Fenton, I can't help you if you can't help me. Danny breathed out fogged air. He started then focused on her, eyes narrowed. Yes, let's help each other. Why don't we start with who are you? Why I am the school nurse. What a question. She laughed, revealing a full set of pointy teeth. Well, this is a problem, said Danny in a vaguely threatening tone. Seeing as how this school hasn't had the money to pay for a nurse in ages, I would like to ask again, who are you? You know, I could say that Mrs. Smith brought me in so that this school will not be at fault for liabilities anymore, answered the nurse in a calm fashion. But you are a bright little whippersnapper. With a flash of light, her disguise dropped, and a familiar figure revealed. Danny reflexively went ghost and growled, Spectra, thanks for watching.